Everybody has a full report. The canvassing is really all you have to read is that statement.
All right, I have 5:34 by the clock up here. I'd like to welcome everybody to the special call meeting. We didn't have anybody sign up to speak, did we, Cindy? All right.
Or Pete.
Do I still need to read this?
Your call.
I wish.
You're in charge.
We're broadcasting. We got anybody that's watching, listening? Just curious, I'm going to give it the short version then. The governor back last year, over a year ago now, suspended a number of the open meetings laws for a period of time. We held our meetings virtually only. We then, as things progressed, shifted into in-person meetings, but limiting the number of people that could be here. As a result of that, we started broadcasting our meetings live contemporaneously, and also have the ability for folks to sign up to speak if they want to do that. There was a deadline for signing up. It's just been confirmed to me. Nobody signed up to speak, so I'm going to dispense with reading that part of this. We welcome those folks that are viewing us remotely. Appreciate their attention to the meeting, and welcome those of you that are here in person. We have a quorum here, and we will then proceed. Our first item of business is consideration of the election matters. As y'all know, we had an election on May 1, 2021. We are required by law to canvass the results of that election within a certain period of time, and today I think was our last day to do so, so we are still within time. Each board member, I think, has a full packet of the results there. I'm going to go for the audience, and I think as a requirement under the law, to basically go over the precinct summaries. As y'all know, we actually had 4 names on the ballot. One of those gentlemen indicated that he was not actually going to run, but his name was already on the ballot. So for place 1, Mr. Alford, unopposed again. And despite being unopposed, he still got 1,276 votes, which is impressive.
How much did you pay him all to do both?
Lots and lots.
Our place 3 position, Mr. Pagel got 643 votes, Mr. Alexander 47 votes, Mr. Benson 112 votes, and Mr. Witt 658 votes. So anybody have any questions about that, any discussion on that? If not, do we have a motion to accept the canvass?
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor. Who made the motion? Was that you?
No, someone down there.
Brad, okay. Motion by Mr. Alford, second by Ms. Vick. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. I think that it's appropriate at this time to say to Mr. Witt, congratulations, sir, and time for you to be sworn in. I know Cindy is a notary, and will do the honors, and I'll turn it over to you. Mr. Alford also has to be sworn in again.
And Ms. Milligan, if you don't mind using the microphone that's already open and on, and that way our public can hear you as you swear in our new board members.
Stand over by him. Yeah, you have to talk louder than the rain. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, I state your name. Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of the Midway ISD Board of Trustees of the state of Texas, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God. You are official.
Yes. So Mr. Witt,
You need to introduce everybody, and y'all need to get some pictures. Yes, you do.
Please.
Yes, you do.
This is my wife Cindy, and these are our kids. This is Courtney and Ashley and Abby. Courtney is a 2020 graduate. Ashley's 10th grade, Abby's 3rd grade. And this is my mom, Sherry Witt, who drove up from Pflugerville.
Members to 28. We have a lot of skin in this Midway game.
Oh, they don't get to leave. They have to stay for the meeting. Oh, well, you get a pass then.
No, she wants to stay in there. The little one. Yep. Their daddy's, their mama's.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so under the Education Code, at the first meeting after any election, it is required that the board reorganize. So it's time for us to do that. There is no particular procedure required under the Education Code or under our local policies. And because of the size of the board, I think it makes a little sense to go through the process of having a motion and a second and all that to nominate folks. It's also more than a little bit awkward to be calling for nominations for president when I'm the president.
I nominate Pete Russick as president of the Midway School Board.
I said we weren't doing seconds. Does anybody else wish to be nominated? Because I would be happy for somebody else to be president as opposed to me. You know, as in,
You're doing a great job.
If it ain't broke.
thank y'all. If there aren't any other nominations for president, then all in favor of Pete Russick, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. We are required to have a vice president. Obviously, that position is open now. Excellent. Any other nominations for vice president? If not, then all in favor of Susan Vick for Vice President, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Congratulations, Ms.
Thank
Vick.
you. Thank
Ms. Vick, for the record, it will be our first female Vice President.
It's about time.
Congratulations. And then the person who holds the office of secretary is not required to be a board member, but to my knowledge, we've always had a board member fill that role, so I will open up.
The sky is about to open.
Guys, about to open up. Open up the floor for nominations for the office of secretary.
I'll nominate Pam Watts. Do you want to do it?
Sure. I can sign my name to things.
You get to sign a lot of things.
Any other nominations for secretary? If not, then all in favor of Pam Watts for secretary, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Congratulations, Ms. Watts. So we are now reorganized, and we get to the really fun part of the evening, the attendance rezoning. George, you gonna lead us off on this? Yes, sir. All right, floor is yours.
All right, members of the board, it's my pleasure again to be here this evening to talk with you about our rezoning process. Stepped out for just a minute, but I wanted to introduce to you Mr. Bob Templeton behind me. Mr. Bob Templeton has been our consultant. You might recall, of course, Mr. Templeton was our demographer, and he also provides services related to rezoning consultation. So I really appreciate Mr. Templeton working with us and working with my team. He's been very responsive and very helpful, and he certainly has followed our timeline as well as followed our guiding principles and worked with us through those. So thanks to Bob. Also want to thank Tracy Marlin. As you all can see, you'll receive shortly here some more handouts from her, but very, very, of course, with rezoning, what's critical is communication, and that is, of course, right up her alley, and has done an excellent job of being able to frame this process for you all as board members and decision makers, as well as, though, for our community and what we know in the future will be occurring with communication about rezoning. So I'll just go ahead and get started, if you don't mind, and just a couple of quick reminders. Hopefully all of you see this in your board packet that's in front of you on your computer. Also have the slides here. But we are right here with, in the middle of the pack here in terms of building zoning scenarios and transition plans and draft maps. So we're on number 5. We are, of course, after tonight, actually this particular board packet is published on the district's website, and so this bit of information is available through that avenue, but also after tonight we will then publish the different scenarios that we're going to discuss to the public as well. And so they will be, we'll be in 6 and 7, if you will, process. And of course, ultimately, our goal, this is as a reminder, had been in June possibly for your board approval of the rezones and the new attendance zones for the fall of 22. Remember, and I always have to stress that this isn't the fall of 21, this isn't our next school year, but one year in advance for 22 implementation. So a quick review, and for those that are joining us via the YouTube channel, just as a review of our guiding principles. Remember, we, as a board, went through that process and decided and approved them in 4 basic themes, if you will. And those themes were centered around location, centered around campus capacity, our student body and programs, and our transition plans. And so we took each one of those, and then we identified sub-themes and basically provided working definitions of each of these guiding principles and used those sub-themes. And if you count those up, I believe the number is 11 of those, and so those were very helpful to us as we received the different scenarios from Mr. Templeton and began looking at them. How close do they come to the different principles? They also, though, were weighted, if you will, in terms of our scoring and looking at from our thought exchange processes that occurred with our community and what was most important to the community, and we knew what was at the top of the list, and so we certainly took value into that, into looking at each one of those. So, just as a reminder, this is our current zones of the 2021 school year of them. You can certainly, if you could, zoom into that, but see by neighborhood We have those. Mr. Templeton was able to provide that in our software about each of the different neighborhoods and the current students that attend our schools from those neighborhoods, because proximity and close to the schools was, of course, very important from our thought exchange. And when we're looking at zones, we wanted to see what those effects might be. So in terms of this next section, when we're scoring them, I've already mentioned this to you, but as I've said before, we did look at the 11 different principles. We also, though, looked at the weighted scoring. And so as you can see there, Tracy has placed, starting with feeder patterns down to property value. That was the weight given from the sub-themes from our community in the thought exchange. That's one of the benefits of our thought exchange in having that activity occur with our community, our parents, stakeholders, so we could see what was most important. And so we'll have a discussion tonight about feeder patterns, about our middle school, looking at the 8 in the fall of '22, the 8 elementary schools and how they lead into middle schools. We'll also, though, look at class sizes and the size of the campuses and room for growth, proximity. That means that proximity is the distance from neighborhoods, driving distance to one of our 8 schools. We'll look at neighborhoods. Was important, did we break up neighborhoods or not? How could we, maybe that was important not to break up neighborhoods if at all possible. So that certainly had been, I think, our value to Mr. Templeton, was working with them and talking to them about the names of these neighborhoods, where they are, where those dividing lines are, to kind of help him understand. It's difficult being a consultant not to know the community, the ins and outs like we do here in the district. Grandfathering, and looking at that, looking at the size of the schools when we open in the fall of '22 and see if there are possible options for grandfathering. Looking at socioeconomic diversity, and so I really appreciate Mr. Templeton looking at our number of free and reduced lunch students, our economically disadvantaged students. You'll notice that common theme throughout each of the different scenarios, looking at the campuses. If we have identified them as maybe a future Title I school, as you all may recall, that does have certain funding tied to it, and so we wanted to be sure that information was laid out. And then finally, transition plans and property values. So, studying the statistical impact before the maps. And so Tracy and I talked a lot about this. That's why you see these different symbols and why initially in your board packet you saw symbols. Because let's be honest about that, there is certainly an objective way to look at rezoning, but we also know that it's an emotional issue too. So we just wanted you all to think through that process of really looking at the data, looking at the facts of it, looking at the guiding principles, looking at taking our best stab at scoring each of the ones that were presented to us. And so tonight our objective is to see your thoughts on those, to see your thoughts about the 3 scenarios, to see if we want to possibly tweak those 3, see if we want to already eliminate 1 or 2 or more, to see where you would like to go with that. And we're going to have a process here in just a few minutes to talk about that. So in all scenarios, I hope you notice that every scenario addresses all 4 of those summary themes, the 4 major themes. But none of them meet all 11 of the sub-themes. None of the scenarios that we will present tonight could reach all 11 of those definitions, if you will, of those sub-themes. Every scenario has 4 elementaries, though, feeding into 2 middle schools without splitting schools. I do want to have a quick some discussion about that. We'll have show you some numbers, show you some of the differences in numbers between Midway Middle School and River Valley Middle School in the future. In every scenario, we do reach 4,500 students at the elementary level, and the campuses will reach that 95% threshold, though, in the 25-26 school year. So again, this is tied to that. It is 95. It's not 100% just yet. But as you all can recall and remember from our demographic study, growth is in the district. It's here to stay. Certainly COVID has had an effect on growth of the district, but all you have to do is continue to drive around and see the developments that are ready to go and have already started again with additional homes, and as well as the greater Waco economy. You see new industries and businesses that have already been announced, and I think more are on their way in greater Waco. And then finally, strong communication, healthy transitions. We want to be as student-centered as we can with this. Want to talk about that, as that's why glad that we are asking for your approval 1 year, 1 year in advance, so we can look at as many issues, but we also want to build community in our schools. I know in the past, Midway added an elementary school, added to my recollection was Castleman Creek back in the 2008 bond, and I believe 1 year later the school opened. But remember, now we're adding two new elementary schools, moving from 6 to 8. So we want to work really hard on building community, building excitement to the fall of 2022 when these schools do open. So, writing down your thoughts. This is kind of why you have some stickies at your placeholders there, to be thinking of some thoughts about each of these. We're going to kind of do a trial run with the middle school, though, first. Right, Tracy? So we want to, I can look at her to make sure about the middle school. But I want you to write your thoughts down. Remember, it's best to put one thought on one sticky, okay? Don't overdo it on your stickies notes so that we can capture those thoughts from you. But let's quickly talk about the middle school zone. So let's start there. And as I said before, each of them have 4 feeder schools, 4 elementary schools that lead into each of the 2 schools. The current middle school, Midway Middle School, will remain and receive Title I support based on the free and reduced lunch numbers. But it does remain under 50%, so no, it won't be over 50% at that particular campuses. Certainly with comparable programs, you all have already done that in your approval of the schematic and the design development of River Valley. We're putting in the same programs that are at our current school, so we can check for sure equity off of programming at all the schools. So this, again, was just looking at how many of the sub-themes were accomplished in the 2 middle school zones, as well as a weighted score in looking at that. The other side there just shows you it's really full credit, half credit, and no credit. So there could be some interpretation about that. I just wanted to give you our thought process, meaning in terms of simplicity of saying, does this particular map or this particular plan, does it meet it? Does it halfway meet it, or doesn't meet it at all? But as I said, there's certainly room for interpretation in between those, so I just wanted to point that out. But as you can see, looking at this in the fall of 22, about almost 2,000 were projected to have middle schoolers. That is grades 6th, 7th, and 8th. So that's somewhere in between 600 and 700 students per grade across the district. We have been graduating around 600 students. We can slowly are increasing that. And I think Mr. Templeton's projections have us closer, though, over the 10-year period to more of that 800 per grade level. So I think that's important. You'll look at there where we'll be with our economically disadvantaged, and as I mentioned, where Midway Middle School would be, a little over 40%, which does qualify it as a Title I school, and right at almost 30 at River Valley. But the question is, not the question, but again, the thought process, just recall or remember, and you know this, but for those listening, the feeder schools leading to River Valley, though, would be South Bosque, Woodway, our new renovated Woodgate Elementary School, soon to be named, and then Spiegelville. But Spiegelville is smaller, and so that is the main driver of the discrepancy between Midway Middle School and River Valley because of the size of Spiegelville. Remember, it's capped around 300 to 350, not a full-size elementary like South Bosque, Woodway, and of course our new Woodgate helps somewhat with having a capacity of 750, but remember that's balanced on the other side with the new elementary also being a capacity of 750. So that really, in a nutshell, explains the current reasons why you see those number differences between the 2 schools. But it does keep students from being split. Remember, the concept of being split is, I've gone to school, I'm at this elementary school, I'm in 5th grade. Depending upon where I live then, some of my friends in 5th grade go to one middle school, some of my friends would go to another middle school. Larger systems, that does occur. It's not unusual in metro areas and faster growth areas. But from our guiding principles and from our thought exchange with parents, that was really, really high about if we could to avoid splitting of programs. Yes, sir.
Semantic question. Are these technically still middle schools, or do they become junior high schools?
I think technically they're now middle when you do 6th, 7th, and 8th. I've heard junior high more when we were just 7th and 8th.
Okay.
So now it's more the truer definition of middle level education.
So we had the name wrong the whole time.
If you want to say that like that, sure. But again, not scientific, I think it's what you want to call it.
Okay.
I don't think it, but from my years and years of study, the middle level education had traditionally been when you had sixth graders is when middle school came about.
Okay.
The old junior high used to be 7th and 8th and 9th grade. That was the former definition of junior high. So we were in the middle. We could have flipped a coin.
School, then the attendance zone for the middle schools are only going to vary according to the attendance zones that are adopted for the elementaries. The 4 that would feed into each of the middle schools remains unchanged.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And just other factors, again, you're looking at years ahead, so look around, you'll see in the elementary zone plans around the 25-26 school year. Certainly we want as many years ahead in this process, but looking at, you'll notice some of the schools, their capacities start filling in at that particular point. We just don't know. There's a lot of unknowns about growth. We certainly see all the indicators for the growth, but there is a lot of, you'll notice, do I have the map here? I don't think so. You'll notice, though, the way this is designed with these feeder patterns, there's a lot of land, though, on the River Valley zone, meaning there's a lot of undeveloped land and could be future growth, certainly higher potential. The current middle school zone then, or the midway middle school zone, would be certainly much higher density population there in the Hewitt area. So, but certainly see lots of potential for even more growth than we have planned for, or that's in our demographic studies. Not that Bob didn't know, he just didn't know yet. We don't know yet. Because there's a lot of speculation going on in this part of on the Highway 84 corridor, as well as the Spiegelville area.
Come on.
After.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Then, yep, since then.
Okay. So just so everybody could see, then, as Mr. Russick was mentioning, these 4 schools, they lead each into the 2 middle schools. And again, any variation would be based on if we changed anything regarding the elementary zone. So, okay, yeah, yes, sir, Ms. Witt.
So the current population of Midway Middle School 7 and 8 is around 1250-ish, is that right? Okay, so going 6, 7, and 8, we would still have, under this projection, 1,126 at the middle school. So it's going to feel close to as crowded as it is now. Is that
About
accurate?
1,100, right.
It's a little smaller, but not a whole lot smaller.
Right.
Okay.
But growth is a little, as you can see through the years, a little slower as well. And then just by 29-30 school year, reaching that
Right,
capacity of
right.
1,400. Okay, so I'll let Tracy talk about this quick activity.
So the activity in this, you're getting your tester on the middle school that's a little bit easier on the decisions. Now hand me your sticky notes for any of your thoughts on the middle school zone, your questions, your concerns. And we're going to actually come post them over here and look collectively at how y'all feel about it. So you can actually get up and come put it on if you'd like. Yeah,
Yep.
we're gonna do it after.
I didn't know if he was gonna keep talking. and
It's a
we can't
chance-
do
We'd
It's a
love to
chance
just
to
take a
move
second,
around.
a break, let you think about the middle school, let you capture your thoughts about what I just described and talked about the middle school.
Thanks for your 2-pager.
Just as a reminder, traditionally, we would be in a workshop setting, which is in a smaller training type room, and we would have that, but because of COVID and trying to spread out more, we chose to meet in our regular boardroom and to have the YouTube channel available.
It's a chance to get up and move around if you'd like to.
So next time I'm gonna ask my technology folks, we need some background music when we have thinking time or something?
Do Jeopardy where there's an end to song?
I'm just teasing.
So George, the numbers that are up here,
Yes.
they're projected out a long ways. Which scenario are these numbers? I mean, I feel like scenarios 1, 2, and 3 are gonna have different
they're-
numbers in here.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Yes, sir. The scenarios that you're going to be looking at on affect just the the River Valley zone, all those different elementary zones. The other ones are pretty set, are set in stone on the Hewitt side. There's not variation, there's not, I mean, that could be, as I said, that's from tonight. I'm just talking off the top of my head. There could be things like within the Hewitt zone, elementary zone, that could possibly go to the Woodgate zone, that then would have those students go into River Valley that could possibly balance a little bit more. But keep that thought, put that on a sticky for when we look at the three elementary, when we look at the three scenarios.
There's more or less gonna be 1,300 on the one side and 1,200 on the other side. We made a shuffle of lines amongst those two groups. Is that accurate way to say that?
The only way, again, to shuffle the zones would simply be, again, if we change one of those elementary zones that feed into River Valley. So we would change Woodgates, let's say, for example, as I was mentioning as an example, and change it with Hewitt, since that's the one bordering it.
But I guess what I'm saying is if the Woodgate line went further into Hewitt, then there'd be more students.
Right,
There'd be
that's
more
what I'm
students
saying
in
the
River
same
Valley.
thing. Yeah.
So, but how do we account for that in these numbers? Because there's not three different scenarios with the numbers up here, there's just one
Right,
set.
it doesn't change the two middle school divisions unless you decide to move one of those. In every time, the
Okay.
combination of the 4 feeder schools makes that number. So unless you chose to split a campus or change the scenario that you're talking about between Woodgate and Hewitt,
Okay.
it won't affect the middle
I
school.
was just trying, yes, she's exactly right. I was saying we'd have to build another elementary zone, build another scenario to look at.
I got you, okay.
The line between Woodgate and Hewitt and Woodgate and Castleman Creek, with all those lines remain the same in all 3 elementary zones.
Yes.
I see what you're saying, yeah, I got you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more thoughts?
All right. Both of mine are about the same thing. It's kind of the same thing.
Any other assistance from the audience would be helpful? Look. Thank you, Dr. Pena.
We all had different color sticky notes.
I have a lengthy comment, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, now the idea is that we're going to share this out. And this was the practice one because the middle school decision isn't as complicated when you look at the 3 maps for elementary. So what we thought on this one is that we did want to know about the middle school zones. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I was actually trying to keep it so the camera could
Oh,
keep it. I'm sorry.
camera. No,
it's
I'm
fine.
sorry.
I'll turn it back.
Okay.
So on the middle school zones, we wanted to know why the current middle school is lower on diversity, and we have questions about grandfathering. We want to know what will transition look like for the 7th graders at middle school and 8th graders at River Valley and how that's going to be addressed. We feel like the feeder schools are logical for the 4 feeders, but help create an uneven economically disadvantaged divide and concerns about that divide. The Midway Middle School exceeds capacity at 27-28, whereas River Valley never does. So does River Valley need to have a bigger area? Versus leave the current plan leaves capacity for greater growth on the River Valley side. Another question about our grandfathering. Are we going to consider this for the 7th to 8th? The middle school capacity at 85.3% and River Valley at 69.1%. Can we make them closer to each other? Our growth for the next 5 years is higher on the Hewitt side, so should we balance River Valley more to accommodate? I think it's a natural fit. The way it's proposed, and River Valley is going to grow faster than projected. We'll need to expand Spiegelville Elementary sooner than later. And, okay.
As Ms. Marlin went through those, one of those things is, yes, to achieve balance, then you don't achieve proximity. So I'm just saying, when you're looking at, that's why these guiding principles, as I was trying to say in some of my remarks leading up to tonight with other groups, is that you can't meet all of them. And that is one thing that you will then compromise, is then you would have travel a lot further for families that really live in the heart, either in the city limit of Waco there or in the city limits of Hewitt, traveling to River Valley for school.
And Mr. Templeton also helped us to understand when you talk about the economically disadvantaged, there's a geographical challenge of that, because to balance that, you would be taking people from the midst of one part and having to transport them further away as well, and break neighborhoods up to change the demographics, because it's where how neighborhoods have formed in areas.
Yep. One thing you could look at it, again, I'm not a mathematician, but if you look at the percent of the economically disadvantaged, total there says 37.3. Both of them do go up or down about the same amount from that mean or that average of the district. So yes, River Valley would be, doing the math, about 8 percentage points lower, and then 6.6 percentage points higher for the middle school. So you kind of have a variance there, but it's not too large of a variance. It's not 20, 30, 40% differences and things like that. It's pretty close within a bound. And then we don't know the guidelines. This is of today. We don't know what the free and reduced lunch guidelines will be in the future. That's always each year. That could change the income levels, and so that's always somewhat of a moving target number.
Yes, on all charts, that economically disadvantaged number is as of current students, not a projection.
So,
The economically disadvantaged numbers there, are those reflective of where we are today with Woodgate and River Valley?
yes.
Yeah, and
Sure, certainly.
and really we don't see significant outcome differences between the two schools now.
Not between River Valley and Woodgate, not at all. No, sir. They're very
Yeah,
comparable with
so,
each
I
other.
mean, when I look at that, I mean, I don't think that is significant enough to drive our decision-making. I mean, if it was 70% and 30%, or, you know, but I mean, I think we've already got a test case in our district that shows we can provide similar outcomes with this kind of spread.
I'm going to ask Ms. Marlin, that's a great thought, if you'll add that sticky thought yourself, what he said about we have similar outcomes now with our current split of Woodgate and River Valley. That's a very good point. Thank you.
I just want to add to that, Rick. I mean, I agree. I mean, we know that, but so many people don't know that, and it's just the perception.
Right.
But I know it'd be very hard to split it to where it looks more even because of the geography. It just, you know, the nicknames the schools have gotten because they perceive it differently, even though we know they're getting the same good level of education and test results.
Midway's a challenge in terms of our district and our roadways and our neighborhoods. If you can't see over there, but Tracy did put up, maybe after the meeting, we have scatter graph to show you just really that you've seen it in Bob's reports in your demographic study, but we do show the density of the district. And just there's lots of wide open spaces and not so many wide open spaces, but majority of our kids live right off of Hewitt Drive, actually. Majority of them, right, if you've ever been on that, you understand how busy it is and the traffic that has occurred. But from Estates, Hewitt Drive, all the way to 35 is our biggest area. And then the next, of course, is the Highway 84 corridor. All right. So thank you for those are good comments and good discussions. Anything else, though, about the middle school before we look at the three?
There's some good questions up there that really are not have anything to do with what we've just been talking about. They're good questions, but the bottom line, because I was the one that gave Tracy the note that said, okay, because the truth of the matter is, there's not really anything else we can do with it without really trampling upon some of the other things that we don't want to do. We don't want to split up where the students from Hewitt are going, or where the students from Woodgate, or the new elementary school. We don't want to start plucking people that live right off of Hewitt Drive and having them go to River Valley. I mean, yeah, this isn't ideal in terms of the size discrepancies, but that's Spiegelville, and there's not anything else you can do with it, because you're going to have to stick Spiegelville somewhere, and wherever you do, if it's a 4-4 split, that you're going to get that. It's just, so, okay.
I appreciate that.
There's a sensitivity of people having to drive all the way out that way if they need to then go back into town as well for
Yeah,
work.
it's-
And on the questions about the 7th grade, 8th grade, and grandfathering, we are going to discuss that after we get through the zones. We're going to talk about transition planning.
Right, and that's what I say, those are important questions, but they really don't have a whole lot to do with the middle school feeder patterns, in my view. And there's just not a whole lot to be done if we're going to stick with a 4-4 split and not divide up who's going from which elementary school, splitting the elementary schools up. You kind of get what you got.
And that's why I said it's logical. I mean, this is just the
Yeah.
only logical way to do it.
I think the challenge before us is not so much how we split the pie, but how we communicate to the community why we decided to slice it the way we did.
Okay. All right, so, done that. Exclamation point scenario. So this is, again, trying to look at it before the map, that you actually saw the maps, and again, the different colors. Very, I think, legible. Appreciate Mr. Templeton working with us on that to clearly define those zones. So this exclamation mark, again, if you look at the different bullets in terms of scoring it there, it does have the lowest score in terms of our guiding principle sub-themes and the weighted score. We did a quick analysis of it. We would have 11 campuses, not 11 campuses, but 11 different instances when we would be over 105 capacity, 22 over 100% capacity, and 14 in the yellow, the 95% capacity. If you look at, in the years ahead. Some of the challenges of this particular scenario are Spiegelville, and Spiegelville getting larger, as you can see with those numbers pushing close to 400. It's always a challenge with their facility and their staffing and the room. And currently we've been operating it, and optimally, it's about a 300-student campus. And optimally, with Mary Lou, Ms. Glazman is HR director, with our staffing and how many teachers we need and all of the other types of positions, it works best. We sometimes lose our economy of scale, if you will, when we get Spiegelville a little bit larger. As you can imagine, when the grade level bumps up from the 22-to-1 ratio, and then you need a third teacher or a third section, and then we just, again, if you look at the cost per student of all of our schools, Spiegelville will always be the most expensive school to operate. So that one is one of the, again, I guess, factors to look at it, but clearly is the scoring of it, the proximity issues, 4 divisions of neighborhoods. We have over almost 1,100 students, as you can see, transitioning throughout this plan. 5 Title I schools will emerge. Again, remember, Title I definition is over 40% of the students qualify for the free and reduced lunch. And these are, as Tracy said, these are this year's numbers, though. We're just projecting off this year's numbers. So that is the first scenario. And so what we'd like you to do is kind of look at that one, though. And if you have any other thoughts on it, that's what your stickies, again, are for, about the exclamation point zone proposal. So.
Give us
Yeah.
what map?
So I want to be sure with Ms. Marlin, do they have this full map yet, Ms. Marlin? For this one, do they have? Yeah, let's just do that.
What map do we, is this the current?
And once
So
everybody
what
gets
we
a
have here
copy
is
of that.
current?
Oh,
That's
this is current.
Okay.
Okay, let us write on that current.
So you take one and pass it
Yeah,
down.
they're all different. So you bring them all for everybody.
Oh. Okay, okay. Gotcha.
Scenario exclamation right now. Don't work ahead. And the point of the symbols is that nothing was prioritized in terms of 1, 2, 3, or ABC. There's not a priority.
It's just a process, folks. We're just trying to, it's a process to look at data and to look at it and be as objective as possible. And as I said, there's a science behind this and an objective criteria, but I know it's also an emotional reaction to zoning as well. So in scenario, the exclamation point, Tracy, they gave you that, right? You can see at the top the map. You can see the guiding principles and the scoring, and then, of course, at the bottom shows you the 8 schools and where they currently are, and those numbers would be the the current numbers, but then in 23, of course, remember, this is a pre-K through fifth grade campus. So we were, part of all of this was also having additional room for fifth graders. So you say, well, that didn't look like we lost very many students from one school, but it's because you're adding fifth grade too. And we're determining, do we have enough room? But look all the way through, they'll go all the way across. Some of our schools stabilize, I call it, kind of stabilize the neighborhoods, whereas other schools will have more of that continual growth.
I had one question about the 2021 column in gray. That's if we took our current school year right this second and went into the zones. So you really just want to look at 22, 23 of when we would actually be in the new schools.
Grades staying at the campuses where they would have been.
It would be right now in May if we did with fifth grade.
Okay.
Right the second off of this year's numbers.
And again, if you prefer, I'll keep going on the next one. But just your top thought on it, or no thought, it's fine too. But if you had a thought about it, we just want to capture those, your first impression. All right, so now I'll just kind of briefly, I see many of you have put some thoughts down. In looking at the scenario, it's one, it's also scenario exclamation point. On the Hewitt side, there's just some minor tweaks, if you will, to the Castleman Creek and Spring Valley zones. However, the new elementary school is really serving growth of the district, would be serving that Park Meadows off of Ritchie Road area, things like that. Some small tweaks to Hewitt zone, and then you'll notice, because you have the colors there in front of you, the blue is a large swath there of Woodgate. It covers all the way using Highway 84 as our dividing line. In terms of proximity, that was one of the things that went in this one, because being closer, you'll notice one neighborhoods on the end of the district would remain at South Bosque. Again, that was based on proximity and looking at mileage to South Bosque versus mileage to Woodgate. One area too, that some South Bosque, how do we get room in South Bosque? You'll notice some of in the inner core of the district areas there right off of Pogue is a change. That, I guess if you're looking at the map to the west of Pogue, currently is South Bosque. This scenario has that moving into Woodway zone, and Woodway loses students from the other side of Highway 84, neighborhoods of the Oaks, Oak Creek, Oak Ridge, and the new one, Tanglewood going in, Hunter's Run, all of that would be served by Woodgate, as well as you can see, Sunwest, I believe Harris Creek, Sunwest, and duplexes along Highway 84 all the way leading up to the school. So in this particular scenario, I could say proximity, mileage was looked at real carefully. Just as a general summary about all of those. All right, let's look at the plan. So if you'll flip over to the next one, scenario 2. I think you're getting the hang of this. This one scores higher in the sub-themes, 9.5 out of 11, and the weighted scores closest to the full 66, 57 out of 66. What this plan does, if you're looking at the map with me, is you'll notice the Woodgate zone is really is just new new development in the district. And so it captures and maintains many of the existing neighborhoods that currently serve South Bosque in terms of going down the 84 corridor, but it exempts anything that would be new in that area. And so, for example, that one area looks like it's sitting alone. That is planned to be the new West End subdivision. There's certainly not room at South Bosque for that. It would go to the Woodgate School. Everything else, and so if subdivisions, this is though, when you look at subdivisions, you stop it, but that when they have another phase, then you would have some subdivisions with phases, let's say 1 or 2, one school, third phase goes to a different elementary. Because that we just captured where we currently are and where the current homes are in the district. This scenario, though, you notice from the notes there, about the same number of transitions of over a little over 1,000 students. It only splits 2, though, neighborhoods, whereas the other one had more splits of neighborhoods. 6 Title I schools, which then would lower some of that free and reduced lunch counts at some schools, but increase others. Remember that 40% is the trigger for some additional funding and support for Title I schools. So you'll know in this case scenario, we have 6 of them. I guess if you're looking at it, though, you'll notice one school would already be, again, we're not able to pull very many students out of South Bosque, but it sort of does have a smaller band of growth. That's what I was saying. Nothing new ever developed then would ever be zoned into South Bosque zone. So that's why it moves from 658 to 730 over that long period of time, because we would be building elementary number 8 there, its growth Woodgate.
The misprint, but the blue section that's back across 84 from where the green is, it's pretty much where the McGregor Airport is. Is that intended to still be colored blue, or should that be green for like a contiguous zone? There's no one there. There's no students there according to the other map. But.
Oh, no, that's what I was referring to, this West End, there is a subdivision.
Oh, there is, going, okay.
There will
thank
be
you.
a future one.
Okay,
And that's what
future,
was
I got
saying.
you.
This scenario captures currently where we are, but nothing new.
that.
And it is developed, and I believe, I don't know if they've started construction, but are about to. Broken ground.
I
on
don't know
site.
what they've done lately. Haven't been out there.
Also, I'm assuming that those watching online are seeing the numbers but not the maps yet, right?
It is in the board packet too, though, if they went to our website.
Okay, I got you, but it's not in the stream, okay, just making sure.
No.
Right,
Because I realize that, Mr. Witt, I realize folks will want to look at the maps, and that's why, as I said, as soon as the meeting's over, we'll publish those too as well, so, because people can focus in and pull up and see maps and be able to look at it, because I know it takes time for it to soak in.
I was just making sure what people
Yeah.
were seeing or not
Yeah.
yet, so.
Yeah. One thing to note about this plan is that I'll say in this plan too about Spiegelville, it does balance Spiegelville to stick around that 300 mark though, because we moved a neighborhood that had been zoned to Spiegelville. Best way to describe that is just west of Highway 6, southwest of Highway 6, near Providence, Ascension Providence. That would be zoned back to Woodway. Its distance is closest to Woodway. And anything there to the north of Highway 6 would stay then at Spiegelville. Notice we have a little triangle above Highway 6 close to Richland Mall. That's in our district. But it does achieve balancing Spiegelville around that 300 mark each year. And in this case, if I'm looking at it, another analysis, we do have more schools that reach over 105 capacity in this plan. We have less schools, though, that are at the 100, the orange level, and we have less schools that are at the yellow level. We just have 2 more schools, though, at the red, in terms of the years quicker. And the reason for that, quite frankly, if you look at it, is South Bosque. South Bosque would see very little relief in the fall of 22. Very little.
Talk about that. How do you operate a school, at that level? That means we would need to think about some probably facility expansion to some degree.
Well, we have 700 plus now, so we're operating, is operating at that capacity.
But we've got what kind of portable facility?
We have several portables, therefore art classes, specials.
Yeah.
And maybe a special in computer lab, and what else? In a special education resource class.
So we would really,
We'd have to keep them.
if we think about it, it's not written on the scenario, but you got to think about some kind of facility relief spending in this scenario.
Because it doesn't do anything to its,
Yeah.
to reduce the
Back to
capacity.
question, what did we spend a big chunk of the 148 million for if we're going to do that?
That's a good sticky note question, yes.
George, while we're paused, on
Yes,
the
perfect.
board packet that's online, on the scenario exclamation point, just for anybody that's looking at that, what Mary Lou just handed out to us is different. It doesn't have Woodway listed, it's got district total there, so anybody that's looking at that, don't be confused.
Those are the correct Woodway numbers.
Right, it
It's
just
a
says district
mislabel. It
total.
says district.
Yeah.
It says
I
district
was just
total.
saying
That
that
is
so that if
Woodway.
anybody in the audience was looking at it, they would understand that is the right numbers for Woodway, but it's just mislabeled there.
I just looked for that one.
Yeah, good. Checking the Woodway numbers.
Okay, so finally, a third scenario called the number sign 3, if you'll look at that one with me. This one, again, I always start with the scores, but it does have the same scores for the guiding principles, sub-themes, and a little bit higher, just half a point higher on the weighted scores. Many of the same things, still six Title I schools, very, very similar to Plan number 2. There is, though, more student transitions in terms of elementary students, a little over 1,100 instead of a little over 1,000. But one less neighborhood subdivision changes, division of a neighborhood, and none of the campus start, though, above 95% when we open these in the fall of 2022. So if you're looking at that actual map with me, this again is just simply where 84 is the dividing line. 84 is a clear cut, except for any new growth by the McGregor Airport. But it's a clear-cut dividing line. Those, sometimes I'm directionally challenged, but southwest of 84 and then above. So it does maintain the neighborhoods, I guess, to the west of Pogue Drive still. It's currently in South Bosque. It would stay South Bosque in this one. Woodway, again, would gain, the neighborhood next to Ascension Providence. It would keep Spiegelville very stable around that 300 mark. Woodgate, if you're looking at that one, on elementary number 8 there. Again, really growth though, because again, that we anticipate the 84 corridor to still be a high growth activity. And so again, you'll notice it feels, but again, that's a 750 capacity building, but does get larger and larger as we get into the 29-30, of course, and beyond school year. What else on this one? South Bosque opens right below 500, and then also a point to make is then that, again, because of that distinct zone now, stabilizes South Bosque to stay around that number of 500. As you can see, through even the 10 years, it doesn't really go, the highest is 522 projected. So it really encapsulates South Bosque zone, and we predict stabilizing. Okay. So just as a reminder, elementary 8 is what would be the the Woodgate campus. Elementary 7 is the new one over off of Ritchie Road on your maps there. In this final scenario, also, this is the lowest number where we will be at 105 over capacity. I counted up 8 different times the heat map showed red, so that's the lowest. We do have 16 times, though, it's in the orange. That's right at scenario 2's number. It's still lower than scenario 1, and 12 times in the yellow, which is right at scenario 2's and lower than scenario 1's. So in that case, it does have less color, if you will, which is a good thing. Less yellow, orange, and red on scenario 3.
To me, the most on all of these is the Hewitt zone. I really think it needs to be smaller, and we need to put more kids at the new elementary school. I mean, Castleman Creek's gonna be pretty full pretty fast, but Hewitt seems to be the one that's staying so full, or except for in the last scenario, it's the best, but it still is gonna be almost full, you know, in 2 years, 3 years. So I was thinking maybe we could give the new elementary school some of that purple
Sure.
of
I
the
think
Hewitt.
I think our challenge, if you'll look, is the fact, though, that in Hewitt, they all will be yellow or orange. As well as, like, geographically, Hewitt would, if you look at this particular scenario 3, if you look at elementary number 8, I'm looking at the boxed 25-26 school year. Hewitt, yes, is orange in the 660 mark, but the Woodgate, that it's already in the 700 marks. So moving kids to that campus wouldn't be achievable.
Instead,
I
right,
was saying, yeah, the new one, elementary 7.
right.
But right, so say it's 7, that could be, I'm saying in terms of that, Spring Valley's already that yellow. So it's 7 at 750, but it gets it in a couple years later. That is the only, and maybe some, it's, I guess, a little bit. We're talking about 10 different slots there at Castleman. 'cause they're
Right,
really
right.
close.
It's just Hewitt still is
Yeah.
almost full to start with. I mean, we're just
But
not
those are certainly-
alleviating Hewitt any,
Yeah.
is
If
what
you
I'm
put
saying.
that on your sticky note, I'd love to hear that, because those are good notes and maybe if some tweaks.
Yeah, I just said remove the zone line for
Yeah.
Hewitt. I said that on every single one.
Yeah, good. Because there are some things too to look
But-
at, and I call zero in down on those neighborhoods and see if we could make a
Yeah.
couple adjustments.
Scenarios, Castleman's got a lot more capacity than Hewitt. I don't know how easy that is to move that line around, but it seems you may get into neighborhood disruption and other challenges.
Right, then that's why, you're right, thank you. You're right, that's why, I mean, Bob could probably attest to that, we were trying to not break up neighborhoods.
Right. I know, but
And so it's not as easy or perfectly say, well, I can move 10 kids to balance, because you're gonna have maybe one side of the street, one school, one side of the street.
but that happened to me growing up. They moved the line and we did it, but.
Mr. Templeton, anything else to add to that discussion on these heat maps?
Well, that's a great observation. The challenge is, and it's the conflict of trying not to split up neighborhoods. When you look at that Hewitt map, there's a large neighborhood to the north of Hewitt, there's a large one to the south, and so then to wiggle kids out of Hewitt, which can be done, then you're gonna be cutting down streets that are, it's gonna feel like right across the street is going to one zone and another's going to another. But that is the challenge. It can certainly be done. We can split it, but you are now going to have to cross that line of splitting a neighborhood.
These maps, I confess, a couple of days ago out on the Hewitt side with some of those questions, and I think even if we look 2 to 3 years out in the future, there's going to be some major road hard lines that we might be able to look at that would help us. Polo Park is a great example. Polo Park currently stops, there's about 1,000 feet where there is no Polo Park, and then it resumes again in the middle of Creekside. But all of the Hewitt Elementary houses right now that are west sort of Polo Park could very easily be moved to the new elementary instead. Polo Park is more of a dividing line. There's no houses on Polo Park itself. So it's just things like that
We can
maybe to
certainly look at
consider.
that.
Not that exact scenario, but things like that to consider.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, so pool, Tracy, you got the last scenario sticky notes? Okay. So it's tough to have, yay, feel-good moment after this when you look at, yeah, when you look at zones, because there are so many factors and so many questions and such detailed work about this, because we know this affects our kids and affects our families. But this is management of the district, meaning this is, though, one of those necessary evils, if you will, of growth of the district and balancing, of course, the 8 elementaries, all outstanding schools, of course, with our newest elementary coming on board, as well as the renovations to Woodgate. So very exciting about that, and all of our programs, of course, equitable across the district and services offered to kids. And so we're proud of all of our schools. And I think if you go now and ask current families what they think about their current elementary, they would be very highly rated very highly too. So each current zone has such a high level of support and appreciation for their particular school, too. That's our challenge, getting ahead and building these new communities.
Can I say something about the buildings too? And this is an observation I make about churches as well, which is a church is not the building. The school also is not the building. The school is the teachers and the administrators and the students that are there. And I think we need to realize that even as we move lines here or there, it's the same teachers, it's the same principals, it's the same families together largely within our district. And so I think regardless of what we do with the lines, moving a neighborhood here or there, we're all going to have great schools here at Midway.
Thank you.
I commend everyone. This was, I can't imagine doing what y'all have done. So this was a lot of work, a lot of hours, I'm sure a lot of hair pulling. Don't take any of it very lightly. It's all very serious, and we all want to do the right thing. And it's going to be hard, but thank you all for all the work you've done
Well, I appreciate that.
on all this.
So let's look real quickly. I'm going to keep going to, we've been doing this now. So the first question here, we're in group discussion now in our presentation tonight. Are we open to narrowing any of these down to two? Are we open to eliminating maybe one? I think, again, your sticky notes are very valuable. We'll have those to analyze and look at any tweaks possibly that might need to be made. And then you will have more time to study these as well as our community. That's what I'm saying. They're going to be published tonight, tomorrow, and we have them open to the public to get some comments from them. But any thoughts about that? Mr. Russick.
I gave Tracy my sticky note for scenario exclamation point, which was a circle with the proverbial bar drawn through it. In my view, we can toss that one. I echo Susan's comments, a lot of hard work, and by me saying toss it, I don't discount all the work that went into it. But when I look at overall its shortcomings and what it doesn't do for us in terms of future growth at those campuses, and what we then would have to do as a district, as a board, in the very near future, I'm just not a fan of it. The one with the A with the circle, whatever you call that. Is that an ampersand? I don't think that's an ampersand.
This is like your Twitter handle.
Yeah,
This means at,
sign.
at.
I don't know, that's what I've always called it, I don't know if that's the right name for it or not. I'm kind of meh on that one, it's okay, but I think it still has some of the same issues, not quite as bad as the exclamation point scenario. To me, the hashtag one is, no, I'm sorry, the hashtag one is that the right one? Yeah, the hashtag one, I think, is the best of the three because it gives us the best opportunity to check as many of the boxes as we can in terms of the guiding principles. It gives us the maximum ability to address future growth. I agree, I saw the same thing that Susan and Colin were talking about in terms of, you know, the Hewitt and tweaking that over there, maybe, if that's possible. But other than that, that's the only shortcoming I saw of that one. So that's just my view. I'm just one.
We must have been thinking the same thoughts, because I feel the same way. I put that up there. I think the hashtag is the best option out of these three with some tweaking to the Hewitt. I just don't want Hewitt to feel like they're just still as congested as they are after all this.
Well, in the, with the thought of beginning with the end in mind, I mean, we're looking at 10-year projections. I think we're going to need to do something about Spiegelville Elementary before 10 years.
I think we'll have some other schools before
So
10 years.
So then if you take that into consideration, you go, well, if you are able to build a full-size school out that direction somewhere, and you're gonna have to redraw some lines, you wanna have, prepare yourself for a minimum, you don't wanna affect
Disruption.
3 or 4 different schools when you can maybe just redraw a couple of lines, in the future. I know that's a lot of ifs, but I have a hard time seeing how we don't on these projections, do something with some other projects to build some stuff in the near future. So with that, you know, then you kind of look at I kind of look at the at scenario and go, okay, I know that keeps us with a, you know, over capacity South Bosque, but that's good incentive to get that solution online sooner than later. And then you would just be redividing, I think, between, I don't know exactly, but then you would just be redividing between South Bosque and Springville in that future scenario, possibly.
I say, I think you might
A lot
still
of what
be,
ifs
I think
there.
you might still be, you know, doing some of Woodgate as well, but
Maybe.
Well, the thing it says to me is I understand there's 10 years of numbers here, but we probably should really only look about five years in if we think we're going to have to deal with this again by that point. So in terms of looking at capacity numbers, I don't think looking at 2030, 31 makes a whole lot of sense. I think looking at 25, 26, 27 does.
Yeah, I think the crystal ball gets pretty cloudy when you get
Yeah.
out to that second 5 years.
There you go.
I see Mr. Templeton shaking his head over there.
That's a great observation, because the reality is, that's based on what we know right now. And things are going to change. There will be new developments, things will speed up, things will slow down. And so we always advise, okay, take the next 5 years and look at the hardest. The last 5 years are really more about maybe guiding some future decisions around, do we need to secure land for future sites? Do we need to, and I know with 100% certainty, you're gonna hit those numbers. It's just, is it gonna happen a little faster or a little slower? Is it gonna ebb and flow a little differently based on what happens with the housing market and construction? And so, no, that's a really good point to really focus in on 5, because you are a fast growth district. You are the destination district for Waco. And so there is growth at China Spring on the north, and then it's here. Crawford's starting to see it a little bit, McGregor. But no, this is the focal point for the builders right now.
So for crystal balls, Mr. Alford, do you have any crystal ball about home building? Because again, remember, folks, the facts out there are, that's why existing home sales are up so much, and why existing home prices have gone up, because there's been a delay because of supplies for new construction. But have you heard anything or seen anything in your world?
Man, I really haven't. You know, I see Tanglewood taking off probably more than I thought originally. I don't know, are you guys considering subdivision there? How are you guys doing, like Tanglewood or West End? Are you figuring out what the capacity is gonna be in all those? Yes, okay.
Yeah, they're included in these growth charts,
Yeah.
both of them.
The whole scenario of the subdivision, the whole capacity of it.
But I guess my point too of asking you was, not to put you on the spot, was there is still some uncertainty in the market, right, about lumber and supplies, but we don't have an exact answer.
It doesn't seem to be affecting most people. Most people just keep pushing forward. You know, we feel like the lumber part of it is gonna start easing at some time. It has to. The other commodities, you know, steel, sheetrock, some of those, they're gonna
Concrete.
fluctuate. And then the big question is interest rates. If interest rates start creeping up, then all bets are off, kinda, you know, you don't know what's gonna happen there. So.
Thank you.
So here's an anecdotal data point. One of my young engineers that works at our office and lives in the DR Horton subdivision, put his house on the market Tuesday. Within 24 hours, he had 12 offers, all over asking price. So think of those, that's the starter home community. I don't know if all 12 of those people, all those 12 of those families were trying to move into into Midway or not, but anyway, lots of
What I
Lots of
understand,
demand.
Too, it's the same thing in the rental market too. It's not like everybody's pulling out of there and there's capacity there. That's full from what I understand pretty much also.
Okay.
We haven't addressed yet, and I'm looking at this blue, is the busing situation. That, even when all those kids are going to South Bosque, that's still a long route. When you're winding through Harris Creek and Sun West, it's a long route. I don't know what the plans are for how we're gonna break that up bus ride, but parents don't take kindly to having 5-year-olds on the bus for an hour. And we've had that in the past, and we cannot make new bus drivers. We can add a lot of things in terms of our resources, but not routes. And that far corner, and then, you know, I don't know, I don't know how else you divide it, but we've had kids, all it takes is one child on Cotton Belt Parkway, and they're on there forever.
The only, again, I don't have the crystal ball either. The only thing I've been told in that, it's, again, hard to look at the map, but the county at one point the county at one point had committed to its next project. As you know, they're about finished with Spiegelville Road, and that's very nice, and it has greatly improved traffic and safety. Is also looking at Chapel and taking that Chapel from the roundabout, currently Chapel and Ritchie Road, and going all the way to Old Lorena Road. And right now, it's very difficult. It's an old county road, but they were going to work, and that was a part of their master capital improvement planning. If that goes into play, it certainly does add another avenue to get to Woodgate for folks along the 84 corridor, which addresses what you're talking about too, transportation. I think the bridge has helped, certainly. You know, the TxDOT and the new bridge has helped tremendously. They'll keep going, you know, not stopping and things of that nature. But what you identify are challenges.
Well, do we foresee having the staff to divide this blue section up into multiple routes so you don't have people in the middle having to ride the bus all the way out to that far corner?
And it's not a answer, depends.
Yeah.
Depends on how many riders we have.
Right.
You know, it's always triggered on riders. The more riders, then yes, you add drivers when you have a bus too full, but then it fluctuates quite a bit. So
That's just the distance that they're gonna have to cover to get from these far west neighborhoods to their new destination really troubles me.
But you look at, that's a indication though of the challenge of our district, how
Yeah,
large
I see
it is.
it.
Now you can visualize it in the Spiegelville area too, but we do have a lot of land, and that also,
It's just what's
growth.
traditionally been very lengthy for kids and families who have no choice is gonna get lengthier. And I'm very bothered by that.
but I can't sit in front of you and give you a prediction of time.
Yeah, no,
at this
it's
point.
just,
Similar to South Bosque, what's currently going on. Again, we have elementary routes, we'll have middle school routes, we have high school routes, so we do have separate routes for grade levels and ages, so that still would be in place. It's just curious, getting to Woodgate from those neighborhoods, as you mentioned, versus,
the hard years for people.
Yeah.
That's a long
I
time.
could see the families on the south side of 84 being frustrated, having to drive by a perfectly good elementary school to get to another elementary school.
That, I
It
think
would-
historically has been our most vocal section of the district, and my sticky note was the one that said they're gonna be burning things in effigy on my lawn if we cut them out. That campus has been their campus for 20, 30, 40 years. I don't know, the numbers don't support it, but the community is not gonna like it.
So are you asking us as part of the question right now, do we want the public to see 3 of these scenarios, 2 of these scenarios, or 1 scenario? Is that one of the things we're trying to deal with?
Yeah, first
Regardless of which
question-
scenario it is, are we,
right. The first question was, is there one you wanted to really eliminate
okay.
today? And I heard some wanting to eliminate the exclamation, which is scenario 1. If they have any requests, I think Mr. Russick identified a lot of them, but.
If you want me to read sticky notes. Or not.
Yeah.
Or would y'all want to come look at them and study a little bit more? And there's a big map as well, if you wanted to look closer.
Okay.
Give everybody an opportunity to
Stretch.
step down, stretch, take a look at them.
That sounds like a good idea.
Do we have any idea how many students live in the far edges of our district out there?
The map that I gave you has the numbers on it, and the scatter map as well.
And that's that number of students or number?
Oh, that's what those numbers are? It doesn't tell us what the numbers are. Oh, that means the number
Okay,
of
so
students.
we'll
So the
stand in
zero is-
recess until 7. Okay, 7 o'clock.
recess till 7. Everybody has, excuse me, 6 minutes to peruse each of the plans.
All right, we're back in session. I know Andy had to leave, and so we still have a quorum, but let the minutes reflect, Andy had to leave. He did make clear, and I want to go ahead so everybody hears the same thing. He said his preference is that in terms of making everything public, that we make all three of these scenarios public, and not that we're voting or taking any action on anything tonight. We're not. I'm, yes, I am. So, where do we go from here, George?
So based on Dr. Popejoy's comments, then in our group discussion here, we would keep the current three. I do know the comments made from both Mrs. Vick and Mr. Witt about Hewitt. I think Mr. Templeton, our consultant, could certainly have some ideas about that balances out the Hewitt schools, with particularly Hewitt Elementary, and looking at the neighborhoods. I think a tweak, as we said, one of our objectives tonight is to look at some tweaks. Not major where they majorly change the map, but we could get possibly even either a fourth scenario, or really, my view could probably be tagged on to these three, unless I'm speaking out of turn, Mr. Templeton. But making that does balance out the new elementary off Ritchie Road, Hewitt Elementary, Castleman Creek. So I think that was good suggestions that we could do from tonight without changing the nature of these three, if that makes sense. Because could we do that, Mr. Templeton, or you need a fourth scenario? I'll leave that up to you.
Well, it does move about 60 kids. So it's about a 60-kid move from the Hewitt zone down to elementary number 7. And, but it balances those numbers pretty nicely between Hewitt and elementary number 7.
Well, then I suggest then that he run those four of us, and then we just have a fourth. But y'all know that will be it. That's the difference.
Comments, questions, discussion from the board while we're here on this?
Okay. All right, so then focusing on students, just wanted to, I think some questions initially coming up from the stickies talked about some of the transition issues. So Tracy, why don't you turn it over to you?
Initially, we proposed to have a grandfathering option or a transition plan. And as we've worked through it with questions, I think we're going to be able to offer a more robust transition plan than just a recommendation for grandfathering, to be able to include building excitement for our new campuses, building leadership and community for the new campuses, help for parents on how to talk with students about change, especially in the aftermath of everything that we've all endured for this last year, assistance with that mental health component, and working on having our PTAs build new leadership. Things like staffing plans with HR about which teachers go to the new campuses and what would be in the best interest of students for that. So I think we'll have a more robust transition plan to offer for you. I've pulled in several of our social services coordinators and Dr. Voigt for help with that too, who has endured quite a few changes in her previous district with opening new campuses. And so we'll be able to address something a little bit more than just grandfathering and have that proposal for you. But I would love your recommendations or requests at this point to go in to be included. And when we go to the community with thought exchange, we'll be able to incorporate a lot of the comments and concerns that come up in the transition plan as well.
My only comment is when it comes to the staffing, I would like that to be done more as an administrative decision than teacher decision is where they want to go, because we had that happen in the past, and it was not it left a lot of bad feelings, letting the teachers decide if they stayed or they went. I think it would be better if it was more an administrative decision to place the teachers in the different schools.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Glazeman is preparing for after the start of the school year in the fall of 21 to begin the process of staffing the 8 elementary schools as well as the 2 middle schools. Give her the microphone.
So everyone's gonna have to make some moves. It's not just gonna be, I wanna go here, I'm gonna, gonna recruit you to come here. We've really gotta look at who's going, because everyone's gonna have to give some.
We want to work very careful. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, we already have done 5th grade this year. We've moved them, and we had a great plan with doing that, so.
We want to make sure that if we hire a bunch of new teachers, they're not all at one campus either, that we have a good
Exactly.
mixture. Okay.
Exactly, and vice versa, all the veterans getting
Right.
to go to the, right, exactly.
You told us before, remind us your leadership team, when you're gonna start getting them in place, they're gonna start earlier. What's that look like?
Yes. I'd like to possibly name the principal for the Ritchie Road, off of Ritchie Road School right after Christmas. And so they have again, that process of working with Ms. Glazeman and staffing the new elementary. We currently do have, though, at Woodgate, Mr. Conoyer as principal, so he'll be, involved. Remember, that school's half the number next year, so he can certainly be involved with staffing of Woodgate's new elementary school, too, early on. But that doesn't mean there'll be planning ahead of time. I think many of you said this, but we did get a good model of how we staff the 5th grade teachers that are now placed at Castleman, Spring Valley, and Hewitt this year. And so it was something similar to that and how that process worked. Remember, we moved some of the Woodgate 5th grade, all of the Woodgate 5th grade teachers and staffed them at the current 3 schools. So we learned some things from that, and we'll work. But definitely a balance of experiences. And I had mentioned too, it's tough to build community of a brand new school with brand new teachers, or even not just 0 years of experience, but just new to the district. They don't have the knowledge, the history of Midway, our standards, our expectations, our standards of excellence across the district, and we want that spread and be sure they're mentored to the new folks to the district. And we look at numbers, and this is a building game. We're going to be building numbers throughout all of this with new teachers that come on. And so it's going to be, I call it a balancing act, push-pull all the time of when additional staff is needed, when numbers necessitate it or not for different types of positions.
At it too, on tying to what Tracy was saying, I think it's obviously it's not a hot button or something that's got to be addressed immediately, but I think in the context of buy-in and identification and what Colin said too about it's not the building, it's the staff, it's the families and everything. Names. We need to move forward and name these so we're not calling it Woodgate Elementary and New Elementary and River Valley Elementary. If we're going to change the names, we need to get on with that.
Yep, and you're exactly right, and we hope maybe to narrow that down this next week at our May 18th meeting. You did good work at the April meeting, and we're ready to continue that process and narrow that down.
Did everybody send George your ideas, your suggestions for school names?
If you had any additional ones, send them my way.
Maybe.
We'll
Sorry, I wasn't here then.
I know.
So.
We'll be sure to give you the current mapping of the names that we have.
Good.
But again, just love creative folks, and we do want to do that. But what Mr. Russick is saying is
Creepy folks.
creative folks. That's it. Is very important though, is that we have those named and beginning that building of community.
This ran out, I'm sorry. I really would love it if y'all were able to decide on the names on Tuesday. That would be wonderful for marketing the new campuses and having people know, instead of the unknown, they will have the known. They'll know their campus. As we know the staff, and we're able to announce the staff, people will know those teachers. Oh, I'm going too. And as we know what neighborhoods are going, they'll say, I know those neighborhoods, I know who lives there. Oh, my friends are going too. I think that there's a lot of opportunity once we can actually start naming some less what ifs and more what.
That said, I do agree it's not about the building, but I'm also reminded of the wisdom. I was told to take my kids on college tours so that they could picture themselves as a student on that campus. I don't know what the timeline needs to be, but as many opportunities as we can give all families to walk through and picture themselves and their child, especially if they've never been there before. We know we typically do kindergarten roundup, but some kind of open house, myself and my student, I can picture us in these halls. Something, have we thought about that? Can we do that?
Yes, ma'am. As soon as we're allowed
I appreciate that, yes.
Architects for 3D renderings where you're walking through the campuses, and we're producing commercials for those to go out this month, if we can get the PS8 rendering in time. So people will be able to watch them on morning announcements this month.
But even if they can go to the parking lot and walk outside, it is close to the real physical experiences we can give them before they actually start class. I think that would make a big difference.
If you're currently
Any-
zoned for
any of
Spring
them.
Valley,
Yeah.
and you're gonna be moved to Castleman Creek or whatever, then being able to say, hey, here's a day for next year's Castleman Creek families to come and see. I think it's great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Or you could even, have we thought about doing a field trip for the kids? That would be, like, if that, I don't know how it would work, but, you know, the kids that might be leaving
Yeah.
South
The-
Boston and going to.
Sure.
you know,
The only challenge will be where we are in our construction schedule.
That's an
Meaning,
idea too, though.
for the new, and that's certainly, as Mr. Witt said, not existing schools, yeah, that's not a problem. It would just be the Woodgate campus and the new one off Ritchie Road.
Have an open night or something
Yeah.
at Castleman Creek.
But the closer we can bring them to the reality of what they're going to have as close as to going to school as we can, I think that would help.
That's what we did for teachers, because it's the same really for teachers.
Exactly.
The great teachers had to
Yeah.
make, you know, we had like tours and
Yeah.
welcome baskets and T-shirts and all that kind of stuff. And so we're talking about that for students.
Yes.
How can we make them
Really bling it up. Yes. I think Wes Canoyer needs to be in charge of that. Wes, you hear that? You got a new job now.
All right, and then just as a reminder, following this evening's meeting, we'll be beginning at some point a formal thought exchange a bit to get public comment. Also, I have other groups coming up that I hope that I can share the different plans with. We're tentatively looking at the Council of PTAs tomorrow, and then I have my teacher groups tomorrow too, and then the thought exchange. Hopefully getting feedback about the current plan, the current proposed plans, as well as about transitions, and have that open for a set period of time. And I think we've gone through most of these decision points tonight. Yep. Very good. Yep, we've done all of those things. And so we will take each one of these sticky notes and maps and go through those very, very carefully, be sure that we're able to provide Mr. Templeton any other feedback. We've gotten the great feedback about balancing Hewitt Elementary, and so we'll be working on that. That's our first priority of the scenarios, is looking at how to make that some changes in order to balance the schools on the Hewitt side there. Anything else? I should add too, a goal then would be then maybe at the May 18th meeting, a week from now, is at least have that proposal on the Hewitt side. As Bob's working on those and get us some maps and things like that. But regardless, we'll have the maps, current maps up, and feedback periods and time open and things like that.
The community will be seeing everything we've seen, including the numbers and capacity and all, okay. I figured, just wanted to make sure.
Yes, ma'am.
So I guess my only question is, on that Hewitt side, do you want that to be a fourth scenario, or are y'all comfortable in including that in these three scenarios and making that change in these three scenarios?
I'd like to see it as a fourth scenario, just so I can be sure I'm seeing the new.
Yeah.
And
And
that's confusing to me, seeing the.
Right. And suggestion then might be we just quickly do that on the 18th. Because we look at it and say, well, there's really nothing, that could be incorporated in all three, and we just make that quick change.
Then it's
doesn't.
really isolated from the rest of the changes.
Right, and I can just give you that opportunity to let it soak in and make sure, and then we could do that.
Yeah, I think it's potentially confusing to folks if we have a fourth scenario, because which of the three does it then tie to?
Yeah.
I think
We
it-
do scenarios 1, 2, and 3 for the River Valley feeder pattern, and then scenarios 1 and 2 for the middle school feeder pattern. Not these 1 and 2, a new 1 and 2.
No, I think that would be confusing.
Yeah,
If I
Bob?
might add, the elementary plans 1, 2, and 3, the Hewitt zone and the new elementary 7 zone are identical
Right.
in all three of those plans.
And that's why we just tweak it for each one of
Yes,
those.
and so
Yeah,
the
yeah.
effect is the same on all the plans. If there was a difference in the UIT plan in 1 versus 2 or 3, then we might need to have a 4-zone. I don't know that you need to have a 4-zone. If you want to make that suggestion, then I would say let's apply it to all 3, because then it will, it's the same in all 3.
You could just zoom into that change.
Illustrate what's different about that.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Well, in all reality, the community hasn't seen these other than tonight, too. So we would be going to them with it as that already, not as a change, as a proposal. But anybody, of course, watching the meeting or would like to comment on it, or in the thought exchange, could still comment and say, I like it the other way.
Yeah. All right, so you clear on what we're gonna do?
I believe we're taking these 3, but with the Hewitt tweak, and going to the community with all 3 of these options with the Hewitt tweak, and it certainly, we're open for comment on if the people in that area that were affected didn't like it.
Right. Everybody on the board good with that? Okay. Outstanding. Anything else for tonight?
Nope, I just
Last-
appreciate all of you and your attention to this important matter, and good discussion tonight.
Well, and again, because y'all did a lot of work to get to this point, and it's very, very appreciated and helpful to, without that, we wouldn't even be able to have this discussion, so, yeah.
Ms. Tracy, Mr. Templeton, they've done fantastic work.
Could you tell us just real quick the other groups you're going to be talking to in the next week or so about this, just so we
Those
know?
are the first 2 that I have left, so I don't have PTA tomorrow. So that's all, I did talk to a lot of groups of our process, but now we'll probably then just go with our thought exchange, because we're at the end of the year too, but also it gives everyone that opportunity to study and go through that process too.
In Spirit Communications Council.
It's tomorrow, teacher group.
All right, then, if nobody has anything else, we're adjourned. Thank you.
I will be there, after the picture.